In the late 80s or in early 90s, Japan's economy was booming, especially for the car industry. The gas crisis had come and gone in the United States, and that allowed all Japanese car manufacturers to get their foot in the door and sell to the Americans, which massively helped them sell a lot more cars. So they rewarded us. Nissan gave us the 300ZX, Mazda gave us the RX-7, Toyota gave us the Supra, and Mitsubishi gave us something that flew completely under the radar. My name is Mark Roden, and this is what makes a Mitsubishi 3000 GT so great. Like I said before, during the 90s, Japan was going through what was called an economic bubble, pretty much meaning that them boys got some racks. And whenever Japanese car companies get some good cheddar in their pockets, they like to turn that cheddar into something that people will talk about for years to come. So in 1989, Mitsubishi would unveil their next sports car at the Tokyo Auto Show called the wonderful Mitsubishi GTO. We also got this car in America too, but it went by the nameplate Mitsubishi 3000 GT or Dodge Stealth.
The Mitsubishi 3000 GT, import car of the year. Mitsubishi, the word is getting around.
The 3000 GT and Dodge Stealth were pretty much exactly the same as the Japanese Mitsubishi GTO. It came with all the same features and it had the same engine in it. However, the Dodge Stealth looked significantly different. The first generation or Z16A 3000 GT would come standard as front-wheel drive with a 3-liter V6 that made 222 horsepower, also being standard with a 5-speed manual transmission. It even looked like a fun time with pop-up headlights, 2 doors only, a long but narrow body, and vents where vents should be. I'm looking at you, FK8 Type R. And the people absolutely loved it, but Mitsubishi decided it was time to give us something even better called the 3000 GT VR4, which would completely change sports cars for years to come. The VR4 3000 GT would come out in 1991 and would take the original design of the base model 3000 GT and make it just significantly better, arguably one of the best JDM sports cars of the 90s. It still came with a 3-liter V6, but now it had 2 stinky turbos on it, helping it push the horsepower number all the way up to 300. This was a great start, but on top of that, the car was now all-wheel drive, and all-wheel drive at the time was still something that was relatively new and looked at as high class. And they didn't stop there. The car was now equipped with a spoiler, but not just any spoiler, an active aero spoiler that would go up or down depending on if you're braking or accelerating, something that, like I said before, was not even being seen on the supercars of the time. They would also introduce to the world something called ECS, which stood for electronically controlled suspension, which was an absolute life changer. The car's suspension now relied on the computer to tell it what to do rather than just absorb bumps and be a passive suspension system. The way it works is the car has a bunch of sensors in it which all go back to the computer, pretty much telling it whether or not there's too much body roll happening in a certain corner. And if there is, the computer will adjust the suspension using actuators to raise or lower the chassis at a certain tire to get it so that there's virtually no body roll going in and out of corners. Pretty much, it helps a ton with not only ride quality for the driver, but also with car handling, so you can get the most traction and control possible during some spirited driving. But if you think that that's all that changed on the VR4 from the base model, you're wrong. Mitsubishi would also add the iconic 4-wheel steering, which had been seen before on cars like the Honda Prelude, but once again, it was never paired with this much technology and power. For those who don't know, 4-wheel steering is exactly how it sounds. When you go into a left-hand corner, the front wheels will turn left, but the rears will turn right to give you the most amount of cornering control possible. But this still wasn't enough for the Mitsubishi. They also gave the exhaust sport and touring modes, meaning you can open and close the exhaust valves to allow more airflow when you're racing around Japanese togeis with your buddies. The Dan 3000 GT VR4 was everything people were looking for in a Japanese sports car. Cutting-edge technology, a forced induction engine making great power, and a low-slung body style that's similar to that of a Ferrari. So obviously we would think this car would be loved by everyone, but sadly Mitsubishi would be its own killer. You see, the car had so much new tech on it that it, quite frankly, Mitsubishi wasn't ready for. It's very cool on paper, but when it was actually put to the test, Most of these parts would either break or not work how they were supposed to most of the time, meaning the car would sadly be quite expensive to not only buy, with a price tag of $68,000 in today's money, but also to own, since these parts were constantly needing to be replaced. So due to that, and the fact that the 300ZX, the Supra, the GTR, Nissan, NSX, RX-7, and just about everything else from Japan in the 90s was so popular, the 3000 GT sales were actually not that high, at only around 12,000 models per year for the first couple of years. That is until 1994, when they would make a huge change to it. In 1994, we got the very first facelift for the 3000 GT, or even you can call it the second generation, and the car would be completely different from before. The body would change massively by getting rid of the pop-up headlights and the caps on the hood, making the whole hood a lot smoother. They also changed the front and rear bumpers and revised the vents on the side to make it all look a little bit more modern. In addition to the body changes, the performance itself was massively increased. The VR4 model now made a whopping 320 horsepower in American markets, which was still marketed as only 276 in Japan because gentleman's agreement, and the 5-speed manual would be swapped out for a much better 6-speed manual, which would make this car have a better quarter-mile time than the 300ZX twin-turbo and RX-7 twin-turbo of the time. They even touched the brakes, my son, giving them larger front brakes and two piston rear calipers to stop fading under heavy use and make the car stop just a itty bit faster. The car was also given bigger tires to accompany the new horsepower numbers it had, and on top of all of that, it was now more comfortable to drive with a revised radio, better air conditioning, and dual airbags in case you got into a little bit of a fender bender. The car was now completely different from the car before, and even though most of the changes were good, a lot of them were not. After 1994, they stopped giving the car the tunable exhaust system, meaning that you couldn't open and close the valves when you wanted to. Then, in 1995, they stopped using the electronically controlled suspension, meaning the suspension would go back to being just a normal passive suspension system. Then, in 1996, they would stop giving the car the active aero, which meant that all that was really left on the car that separated it so much from everything else was the four-wheel steering. Now, even though this news is probably heartbreaking to you and you're writing an angry letter to Mitsubishi right now, let me stop you right there, because even though it hurts, you need to look at it from their point of view. Yes, the first gen 3K GT was very cool with all those features, but it was only cool if you're looking from the outside, because actually owning that car was nothing but a financial nightmare. The parts would constantly break and fixing them was not cheap, especially in America where we never saw this technology before. So unless you're a mechanic yourself and you knew how to fix these new parts during a time where you couldn't just look up a YouTube video to walk you through it, chances are this car was not going to be for you. The second generation 3000 GT just realized that it had to tone itself down if it wanted to survive. And sure enough, it worked. In 1994, right after the release of the second generation, they sold the most models ever at 16,000, which still isn't great, but compared to the 12,000 that it was getting before, that's a massive success. Even though all those features were now missing, the car was now even faster and was the same price for a much lighter and quicker sports car from Mitsubishi. And obviously the people loved that. So in 1997, they would do it one more time.
That accelerates, steers, and stops with all fours. That ingenious concept has now been engineered into a car. Introducing the Mitsubishi 3000 GT.
The third generation 3000 GT came out in 1997 and was pretty much the same as the last generation in terms of performance, but it did have some serious body changes. The front bumper was now much more aggressive, the headlights and turn signals looked really sick actually, and the car was given two different spoilers, a normal arched one for the base model and a huge quote-unquote combat wing for the VR4 models. At this point, the Dodge Stealth had stopped production, and sadly the 3000 GT would soon follow suit due to increasing side impact regulations and sales numbers falling back down again, meaning the last time that we have seen the 3000 GT or the GTO nameplate was in 2000. And even though that does suck, the car had a pretty good runtime of 10 years, and if you take into account the Dodge Stealth, GTO, and 3000 GT all having different sales numbers, there's actually quite a bit of them out there, so don't give up hope on owning one. And for those skeptical about it, yes, the 3000 GT VR4 was a little bit too ahead of its time, and yes, it isn't the easiest car to own, But if you know what you're doing, then you can own something that was truly worthy of being called a legend, and you can do it for less than $20,000. I want to end this video by saying Mitsubishi should bring back the 3000 GT, but to be honest, if they brought it back, it would never be able to live up to what made the original so special back in the day. So even though this is going to be very tough to say, keep it dead, Mitsubishi. And if you do bring it back, please, for the love of God, don't you dare turn it into a crossover SUV. But ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of today's deep dive on the Mitsubishi 3000 Jedi. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what other cars you'd like to see a deep dive on. The next one, I'm pretty sure, is going to be the G35/G37. We're just going to put them in one video because, duh. Also, guys, in the top of the comments is going to be a pinned comment to my new gaming channel where I'm going to be going over GTA Online content. If you enjoy GTA Online and you want to watch some GTA Online content, please go over there and check it out. I'd really appreciate it. But only check it out if you actually enjoy GTA Online content. You don't have to go check it out, so don't go over there just because you want to support me. Go over there because you like GTA. All right? But either way, though, guys, I really appreciate all the support I've been getting recently. Happy freaking New Year. Have a nice night.